It's the opposite of expanding. So when we expand, we take the numbers out of the brackets. So we multiply out. So we'd get 6x plus 12 here. When we factorize, we're going to be putting things back into their brackets. We're essentially going to be dividing and putting those numbers, the factors, back into their brackets. So because it's all about factors and division and multiplication, we need to make sure we're really confident with finding the highest common factor. So when we're looking at numbers like 10x and 15, these numbers have multiple pairs of factor pairs. So what we have to do is we have to go through and find the numbers, the pairs, the factor pairs that will give us a common factor. So 10 and 15 have a highest common factor of 5. So I'm going to go 2 times by 5 times by x. That equals 10x. And then I'm also going to have 15 is 3 times by 5. Now their highest common factor is the 5 in each one. We can see that a factor means something that multiplies together to give a number. So the number that's the biggest number that multiplies together to give 10x and 15 is 5. Let's try another pair. So we have 12a and 18b. So 12 can be written as 2 times by 6. And if it's multiplied by a, we can add the a on the end. Now 18 can be written as 3 times by 6. And if we're multiplying by b, we can add the b on the end. Now we can really clearly see that the highest common factor in these two numbers is the 6 because that multiplies within both of the numbers. So the highest common factor is equal to 6. Now this last one's going to be a little bit tricky. We've got to remember that when we have a term, the term includes the coefficients, it includes the pronumerals, and it also includes the sign. So here we have a negative multiplied with the 6, which then multiplies with the c and the d. So we've got a negative, and then if I write 6, I can pull out 6 and rewrite it as 2 times by 3, and this is going to be times by c times by c times by d, because we have c squared, so we get 2 c's. Now if we have the 8, let's have a look here at the second term, of negative 8 c d squared, that's going to be negative 2 times by 4 times by c times by d times by d. So that's basically what we did last term, where we wrote terms in their expanded form. So now we can see the things that are common. They both of these numbers have a negative, both of these numbers have a 2, and both of these numbers have a c. So the number that's common for both of them is if we put all those common bits together, the negative is common, the 2 is common, and the c is common. Both of those two numbers have a negative, a 2, and a c. So that's what we call the highest common factor. The big thing we have to remember here is that a negative and a negative makes a highest common factor, becomes part of the highest common factor. Okay, now factorizing is about using that highest common factor, putting it out the front, and then figuring out what factors are left over that go inside the brackets. So let's have a look at this one here. I'm going to write it in full expanded form. So 3y plus 3, that's 3 times by y plus 3 times by 1. Now we have a look at what's common. We can see that the 3 is the highest common factor. So I'm going to put that out the front. And then inside the brackets, we put the factors that are left over. So in the first term, we have a y left over, and in the second term, we have a 1 left over. So any leftover factors go inside the brackets. We've also got this positive here. The positive is also left over, so we need to make sure he goes inside the bracket as well. So it's going to be y plus 1 inside the brackets. It's almost like, one way to think about it, it's almost like we've taken each term and divided by 3, as in taken out the common factor, and what we get left with, so if it's 3y divided by 3, you would get left over with y. If it was took the second term and divided it by 3, you'd have 3 times by 1 divided by 3 leaves 1. So this is where we get the opposite of doing the expanding. Now, when we do factorizing, sometimes it's really good to check that we've got the right thing. So I'm going to go back the other way. I'm going to expand to see whether or not I did the right thing. So remember, when we expand, we multiply the term out the front by all the terms on the inside. So we're going to have 3 times by y, which is 3y, and 3 times by 1, which is 3, which is what we started with. So that means that the answer that we got in the factorized version is the correct answer, because when we expanded it again, we got what we started with. Okay, let's try another one. Okay, 10a minus 12. So let's break it up into some factor pairs. 10 can be written as 2 times by 5 times by a, and we've got a minus, and then 12 can be written as 2 times by 6. Now let's have a look at what we have that's common. First of all, the 2 is common. Then we have to ask ourselves, are any of the signs common or any of the pronumerals common? Not in this case. So what we can do is we put the 2, the highest common factor, which is the 2, out the front, and then we do the brackets, and then we look at all the factors that are left over. So in the first term, we have a factor of 5a left over. In the second term, we have a minus left over, and we also have a factor of 6 left over. So when we factorize 10a minus 12, we get the factorized version of 2 multiplied by 5a minus 6. Let's quickly check that. So if we were to expand it, go the other way, are we going to end up with what we started with? 2 times by 5a is 10a. 2 times by minus 6 is negative 12. So that's what we started with, which means our factorized version is correct. Now, this very last one, this can be done in one of 2 ways. Okay, I'm going to do it both ways. Firstly, let's have a look at the negative 15b plus 10c. If I look at the negative 15b, I can say that's negative 5 times by 3 times by b, and positive 10 could be minus 5 times by minus 2c. Because remember, a negative multiplied with a negative makes a positive. So if we have a look at what's common, we have a negative 5 common and a negative 5 common. And then we have a look, so then when we factorize, we put the negative 5 out the front, and the remaining factors go inside the bracket. So that's one way to write this. The other way, and this is where maths gets a bit weird, because you can do things in multiple ways and have them look different, but they actually mean the same thing. So we could have, if we start off from the beginning, negative 15b plus 10c, we could write this as 5 times by negative 3 times by b plus 5 times by 2 times by c. So if we look at what's common, only the positive 5 is common in this case. And so we put that out the front, and the leftover bits would be negative 3b plus 2c. Now remember from last term, when we talked about terms, it's nicer to put subtraction terms after addition terms. So I can switch these two around. And what's actually funny is if we check this in a second, these two are equal to exactly the same thing, even though they look so different. Let's have a look at why they would be the same. So if we start off with our if we start off with our original equation, which was negative 15b plus 10c, and we had one version that looked like this, negative 5, 3b minus 2c, and we had another version that looked like this, 5, 2c minus 3b. If we do a check on both of these, if we expand them back out and see what we get, negative 5 times by 3b is negative 15b. Negative 5 times by negative 2c is positive 10c. So that first version is the same. So that means our factorization is correct. And if we check this second one here, if we expand it out, 5 times by 2c is 10c, and 5 times by negative 3b is negative 15b. That's also the same answer as what we started with, even though the order is different. So that means also that this factorized version is also correct. So that's, even though it's weird, even though math seems weird in this case, that it's two different things that look completely different, they actually mean the same thing. Okay, so what I want you to do is, after having watched this video and taken some notes, I want you to go to exercise 3.7 and have a practice at question 1b, question 2b, and question 3b. If you have a look at the text resources that go along with this lesson, there are other questions that you can continue on with, but they're the basics to consolidate what we've done.